Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle English, Director of Operations at J&J Editorial. Thank you for joining today's SSP webcast, Maintaining Quality Peer Review in Times of Change. Peer review plays such a vital role in the publication of scholarly work. It serves to validate the scientific and technical claims of authors, helps authors to maintain high standards within their field, and allows journals to reduce errors, omissions, and false claims by leveraging the expertise of trusted peer reviewers. Despite criticisms for its perceived slowness or bias, the institution of peer review has been widely accepted for over 300 years. As professionals in the scholarly publishing industry, we are well aware of the constantly evolving ideologies in our field. From single to double blind to open peer review and preprints, publishers, societies, and journal staff have had to find ways to adapt. In today's webcast, we're going to talk about how 3 organizations have faced some of these challenges and experimented with new processes. We'll talk about some of the strains that journals are facing, whether it be reviewer fatigue, overburdened staff, or lack of diversity in journal representation, and what's being done to make things better. We'll talk about what kind of planning and preparation went into some of these decisions and cover what worked and didn't work. So I'd like to dive right in and have each panelist introduce themselves. So first, we have Dana Compton.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Compton. I'm the editorial director at the American Society of Civil Engineers. I've been with ASCE since October of 2018. A little about my background. Prior to joining ASCE, I was a senior consultant with KWF Consulting, serving primarily society publishing clients. Before KWF, I served as publication director at PNAS for nearly 9 years, and actually started my society publishing career in production at the American Society of Clinical Oncology. On the extracurricular side of things, I'm immediate past president of the Council of Science Editors, having served as president for the 2019-20 year. So my role at ASCE, I oversee editorial operations for both our journals and books publishing programs. So for journals, that's really overseeing the peer review process for our portfolio. And just to put my perspective in context for this session, I'll just give you a really quick snapshot of our journals program. We publish 34 journal titles. Well, really 35. We perform peer review for 34. We received over 14,700 submissions in 2019. And our journals really vary quite considerably in size. So some of our quarterly titles account for only 50, 80 submissions a year. But our largest journals receive well over 1,000 submissions a year. Across the board, our submission volume has increased by 125%, or actually more than 125% since 2010. So quite significant growth over the past decade. And certainly some of our journals have accounted for the vast share of that increase. So some of them have been really exploding quite significantly.
Great, thank you. So next we have Jennifer Regala.
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Regala. Currently, I am the Director of Publications and Executive Editor at the American Urological Association. But I started out my career in scholarly publishing what seems like 100 years ago, and I won't give an exact number, at Cadmus Communications, which is now Senveo, and moved on to Dartmouth Journal Services, which is now Sheridan Journal Services. And those two employments really gave me a chance to learn so much about scholarly publishing because I got to touch so many different society and association titles in the STM world. So that was a great foundation. From there, I moved on to the American Society of Plant Biologists, where I was the managing editor of the Plant Cell and Plant Physiology. And I also would like to note that today I will be actually talking about peer review from the perspective of that role that I played. At the American Society of Plant Biologists, we had 2 self-published journals, Plant Physiology, which is almost 100 years old and the most cited plant biology journal in the world, and the Plant Cell, which just celebrated its 30th anniversary last year. We had a lot of fun celebrations around that and really enjoyed our time promoting our wonderful journal's 30 years of success. And also ASPB does co-publish a sound science journal, and that is co-published with the Society for Experimental Biology and Wiley. Plant Phys and the Plant Cell are both monthly journals. The Plant Cell projecting approximately 800 to 900 submissions this year, with approximately 175 to 180 research articles published. And Plant Phys has a projected 1,500 to 1,600 submissions this year, with approximately 400 published. And when I'm referring to published, I'm talking about solely research articles. We're extremely proud of our peer review at the American Society of Plant Biologists. When I was the managing editor there, I oversaw 2 peer review managers, and I can't say enough about how integral they are to the journal process at ASPB. They basically knew it all, and in the best possible way. I oversaw at a very high level the relationship that we had with our peer review software provider, which was eJournal Press. But I was never required to be in the weeds of any of the peer review management, because those peer review managers were so competent and had so many years of institutional experience and know-how. They knew our authors, editors, reviewers, reports, the system, everything inside and out, and were truly the backbone of our journal operations. So with that, I really am looking forward to this discussion today, and I guess back to you.
Great, thanks so much, Jennifer. So next we have Karen Stanwood.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Stanwood. I am the Director of Electronic Publishing and Production at SLAC Incorporated. SLAC publishes 14 healthcare journals across medical, nursing, and allied health specialties. The number of submissions for some of our newer journals that are maybe only 2 years old could be 100 submissions or less, but some of our more established publications, particularly in the nursing areas, are soon to be celebrating their 60th anniversary and can get up to 900 or so submissions. So my history with the company, I will give a number because it is a lovely anniversary number. I've been with SLAC for 25 years come September, working my way up from assistant editor to my current role. So I remember peer review, not quite on legal pads. I was a little bit past that, but my first look into peer review was typing up decision letters and printing those out on letterhead to mail out to authors, and having stacks and stacks and stacks of actual paper folders with copies of revisions and all of those things stacked up in my office. My current role, I'm primarily involved from the systems level. So for example, when we transitioned to a new system, I configured the new system, and my day-to-day, I'm very involved with our peer review coordinators as well as our journal managers to implement new things, evaluate how they're working, monitor their progress from a systems level across all of our publications. And I'm excited about this webinar. Back to you, Michelle.
Okay, awesome. It was great to hear everybody's backgrounds. So I'm going to just have us really dig into this first question. Okay, guys, sorry, I was on mute. So let's dig into the first question. What does peer review mean to your organization? Let's just start with you, Karen.
Excellent. So as I said, I have a long history with peer review at SLAC, and a lot of our other staff do as well. For example, our peer review coordinators all have a lengthy tenure with the journals that they've been working on, as well as the journal managers. So we take great pride in our peer review system. We really do feel that it is the cornerstone of our operation and really the starting point for everything else. Coming up as an editor, If there was not peer-reviewed papers, there was nothing for us to do. So it was really the foundation of everything that started with our editorial positions. Our editors as well, outside of our organization, our medical and nursing and allied health editors are very involved in the publications. All of our journals do have a point person, so a main editor-in-chief or 2 co-editors-in-chief. So we really feel that in the healthcare field that peer review is integral. It's really the future of the research as well as actual patient lives that are at stake.
Great. What about Jennifer?
Sorry about that, user error. I'm muting and unmuting
No
myself.
problem.
Getting a little too excited to talk about my point of view. I would have to say that peer review is the absolute foundation of ASPB's journals program. ASPB just has such a long history of solid peer review, priding themselves on their 2 high impact journals that are self-published, again, Plant Physiology and the Plant Cell, and then the 3rd sound science journal, Plant Direct. An especially exciting part of the ASPB peer review program is that the Plant Cell publishes peer review reports for research articles if both the authors and reviewers of an article agree. And that's a pretty exciting thing. And we're proud to say that approximately 70% thereabouts of authors and reviewers do agree to the publication of those peer review reports. And we've received so much positive feedback about that. That's something that does remain as a piece of discussion. If possibly down the road, those peer review reports will be published as a condition of publication in the journal. Not quite there yet, but something that remains a piece of discussion. Also, I should note that the reviewers of those peer review reports do remain anonymous. For our Sound Science journal, Plant Direct, peer review reports are published for each research article. The editor-in-chief of that journal, Ivan Baxter of the Danforth Center, is really, really proud of that and says, basically, if you're publishing in our journal, you are agreeing to, or reviewing in that journal, you're agreeing to that publication. Plant Physiology, the final journal, does not publish peer review reports at this time, but the idea does remain as a discussion point on the editorial board's standing agenda. I also want to throw out here too, perhaps for later discussion today, or just for discussion on Twitter at another time, or at any time for discussion. Open peer review is widely defined, and it really fascinates me. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and you can see even within our journal family at ASPB, it does mean different things as well. However, I just want to note that ASPB is super proud of its commitment to transparency in the peer review process and is looking at ways to extend this transparency.
Great. Dana, tell us a little bit about how ASC values peer review.
Sure. So, I mean, like Karen and Jennifer's organizations, peer review is really, the backbone of our journal publishing. ASCE too has a long history of publishing technical content. So our 12 original technical journals were established in 1956, but those were spun off from transactions and proceedings publications that were started in 1867. So ASCE too, as an organization, really values this communication of technical content. And from the civil engineering perspective, this is really about safety in our environment. So our editors and our reviewers and our authors take the peer review process very seriously, because there are real, just like in healthcare and medicine, there are real ramifications to putting out research that hasn't been properly vetted. So, not to belabor, but it's just, I think we're all coming at this from different fields and different perspectives, but all of our editors and our authors and our reviewers really value, what that process, how it improves the content and ensures quality, and we feel a real responsibility to make that a smooth and reliable process.
Great, so let's kind of move on to our next question here. I'm really curious to know what kind of peer review, like the nuts and bolts, is conducted by all of your organizations, and why? Why was that chosen? Let's start this time with Jennifer.
Okay, I got myself off mute really quickly, so bonus points right there. ASPB conducts single blind peer review, and it's just the way that we've always conducted business. I will say that from time to time, the question does come up, and should double blind peer review be the answer? And of course, there's many different pros and cons to that. To this point, the conversation hasn't become serious enough that we have seriously thought about from an editorial board. When I say we, I guess I mean the royal we. The editorial boards haven't decided to move forward with double blind peer review. But at this point, single blind peer review has worked okay for us.
Dana, what about you?
Yeah, so I was going to say that at ASCE, we're in much the same situation as ASPB. We also follow a single blind process. And we've occasionally had editors inquire about options for double blind review, or ask us, would double blind be better? Part of what's held us back so far is that we have 34 journals going through the process, and to make that happen efficiently, we really insist that all journals follow the same policies. We're not going to move one journal to double blind and keep the others in a single blind process. So a transition really would require buy-in from all of our editors. That's sometimes easier said than done. So not in the past, not all of them have, kind of traditionally been on board, or if not on board, at least, felt strongly enough about a change that we've chosen to pursue it. Single blind has been working for us as well. We've always decided that, the resources that would be required to make a change, not only to, update editorial manager to accommodate double blind, but also the staff resources that would go into monitoring anonymity, checking for identifying information, removing it if need be. We've decided to put those resources elsewhere. What I will say is that this question has recently come up again, given everything that's happening in the world and all of the focus on diversity and inclusion. We've started to broach this conversation again. Do we need to think more seriously about eliminating bias? And so the question was actually brought up last week, I believe, or the week before, by one of our members in response to an essay that was written by the chair of our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, really asking, what's our publications program doing to look at our policies and kind of look under the hood of our operation to eliminate bias. And so it's a conversation that we plan to broach again with our editors this fall at our annual editors workshop.
Great. Karen, tell us a little bit about how SLAC does things.
Sure. So interestingly, there's very much a divide between our nursing and allied health publications and our medical publications. So historically, our nursing and allied health journals have conducted double-blind review, and our medical journals have done single-blind. So just anecdotally, there's, other than this is, the way that we do it, I think a lot of it is just based on conversations with our editors and what's going on in the field, and how the editors and boards, perceive the best method of peer review for their publication. It's interesting that there's such a hard split between the different areas, but it does seem like nurses and the allied health professionals do feel that double-blind review reduces bias. But as Dana mentioned, I do know that it puts a lot more work on authors to be cognizant of what identifying information. Some editors are tougher in terms of names of states or cities or universities. Some others are less stringent, that it's more about author names and that sort of thing. But it's definitely a lot more author work to pay attention to that, as well as our peer review staff who work on those journals. They do have a lot more work in terms of not even fixing things, because we try not to touch the author's work. We try to refer back to them if it's just a matter of hiding a title page so that it won't go to reviewers. That's an easy thing, but if something is throughout the paper, it's going to have to go back to the author. And so there's just a iterative process of checking and then reconfirming and reconfirming until it's ready to move on. So on the flip side, physicians seem to be more concerned with knowing what groups are conducting what research, where that research is coming out of, especially in some of the smaller specialties and subspecialties. They do know each other. And I think that does help give them some context for the research and where it's coming from and what it's building upon.
Great. Yeah, that's all so interesting. And it's cool to see that you guys are managing to do both single and double. That's cool.
A lot of work.
So our
Not
next,
gonna lie.
yeah, I have to imagine. So I'm going to have Dana tackle this next question first. So what goes into establishing and maintaining high quality peer review within your organization?
Sure. So I'll kind of refer back to something that Jennifer mentioned earlier about having an amazing editorial team. Our staff is, I think, our most important asset. Not only our in-house staff, but also the vendors that we work with. So, much of our in-house staff has a very long tenure at ASCE, so they're super knowledgeable about our policies, our processes. Their historical knowledge is really essential. Just to put that in context, we have an executive editor, 3 managing editors, and 2 assistant managing editors in-house. And several of them have been with us for over a decade. We also work with 2 editorial services firms because we just couldn't, with the staff that we have in-house, we'd never be able to keep up with the number of submissions that we're receiving. So they're doing a lot of the, kind of editorial coordinator duties. And that's also very important for us. But I think the most important thing that our staff has done, and this is partially, by nature of the length of time they've been with ASCE, but also, just their expertise in the field and the autonomy that they feel they have to manage their journals. The relationships that they've established with our volunteer editors are I think really the cornerstone of our process. I mean, our managing editors are in constant contact with their chief editors. We're helping them monitor journal health and performance, kind of identify bottlenecks and come up with ways to address them and solve them. And then the other thing I would say is our peer review system, and we work with editorial manager, and we have a journal systems manager whose primary responsibility is to maintain that system, maintain the relationship with ARIES, but she does a ton of reporting for us. And I think that's really important. So, being able to get meaningful data out of your peer review system and then actually know how to analyze it and figure out how to act on it is really helpful for us and helps us keep things moving efficiently, helps our turnaround times, looking at reviewer performance and things like that.
Karen, what about you?
So perfect segue. Thanks, Dana. As I mentioned before, like kind of being in that system role, I am the person who puts a lot of those reports together and, you know, it just helps manage them. And especially when we need reports across multiple journals. Unfortunately, the way that reports are structured in Editorial Manager, it's not just a simple, you know, roll out across a number of publications. It does have to be created in each publication. So in terms of what I do, it is still fairly high touch, even though I'm not involved in the day-to-day, you know, looking at manuscripts or sending out for review. But in terms of just managing the system and are there better ways that we can utilize the system, I'm very involved in that. But, you know, as I mentioned, and as the others have mentioned, we do have our peer review staff and our in-house editors are very well versed in the system and just, you know, have such great relationships with their outside medical and nursing and allied health editors, especially during this, you know, this COVID time, where, you know, some of our editors are, you know, texting the managers, they're, you know, jumping on Zoom calls with them. For years, our peer review staff have been known to, you know, talk to their editors on the weekends, because a lot of them, that's when they have downtime to work in the peer review system. So, you know, like jump on a call, you know, at 10 o'clock on a Sunday, and, you know, that's when we'll get things done. So I feel like we are so used to it, we probably couldn't do it a different way. Although that does make it an incredibly high touch, you know, sort of thing to radically scale up, you know, would be quite a process. So our peer review staff, yeah, they're constantly answering questions, fixing errors, following up on issues, uploading files for authors. A lot of times authors are struggling, whether it's with video files or just something unique, or their internet may not be as stable, that there's all kinds of things like that. But then on the higher level, there are, again, system things that we can put into place. So I will say Editorial Manager has a robust system of reminders and possibilities for reminders, color coding, flags, signposting, you know, all of these things that we can put into place from a higher system level to help everyone do their job better, whether it's our reviewers, authors, editors, and then our in-house peer review and journal manager staff.
Awesome. Jennifer, jump in and tell us about your system.
So I want to just build onto something that Karen said, the high touch, and that's at ASPB, we say that just a tiny bit differently, but the warm touch. And that's what our peer review managers absolutely provide. I would actually say it's very fascinating at ASPB to me that the peer review managers are, I would venture to say, for many of our authors, reviewers, and editors, they are the face of our program. They are that well respected and established, and they know the answers to everything. And if they don't, they say so, and they get the answer to anything pretty quickly. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's astonishing. They know the system inside and out, and they know what EJP can and cannot do within the parameters of our current setup. And they're great at working with the EJP team too to provide solutions. Another thing that's really interesting about ASPB is that the editors-in-chief are super involved, both of them for Plant Phys and Plant Cell. They're very, very involved in the day-to-day peer review operations of the system itself. And they're very aware, again, of what it can and cannot do. And they work so closely with those peer review managers just to tweak things and customize things in a way that works for their editorial boards. I will say that shortcomings, though, of course, sometimes things can get a bit over customized, so maybe a little too complicated. But again, the peer review managers are good, and they're also really good too about reining in our editorial, you know, our editor-in-chief's requests. Sometimes requests will come through from an ed board member or an editor-in-chief, and they're just kind of like, let's not, but they do it just in such a great way, and they always have a great reason as to why that might not be a good thing. Something I think that's really great about EJP, though, is they're very generous with their information. Once a week, they send out a really useful, they call it, I think, the tip of the week. And they send those things out, and it really gives us a good idea about what other organizations are doing, and gives us a chance to maybe try things out that might be useful and helpful. I would say one shortcoming, and I think it's really just true of any organization that's on the smaller side, what would be so great is if ASPB had a data analysis manager who could kind of pull peer review report information and then morph that into information that is provided by other parts of ASPB, membership, meetings, education, kind of weave all of that information in together. I know we've had a lot of questions lately with COVID, diversity, inclusion, all of those different things, and we have a challenging time weaving that information in. We know what we want, and also we're pretty sure how we could get it. It's just a resource thing. Our reporting on a standard level is on par, and the peer review managers do a great job with that, but there's only so much time in a day when they're the only two providing such a warm touch. That doesn't leave, you know, they're already working 365 days. That doesn't leave a lot of time in their schedules to do some of these things that are so super important. And I will say that's why it's, you know, really interesting to get input. Like Paige Wooden from AGU had a recent article in the Scholarly Kitchen where, you know, they were talking about the AGU's work in some of this research, and we're like, yes, we could totally do that, but how? So that's the big challenge and the big thing that weighs on my mind, and I know on so many of our minds here at large.
Yeah, well, and also thank you for kind of the segue, because that's something that I want to talk a little bit more about, just challenges in general. So yeah, maybe I'll start with Karen this time. So what are some particular challenges that your organization faces under normal circumstances, and how do you address those? And I say normal because you all know I'm going to ask a follow-up question, like what's going on now during COVID, because I feel like that's thrown us all for a loop. So Karen, go ahead and get us started on this one.
Sure. I am going to venture to guess I'm not alone in talking first about just constantly dealing with reviewer fatigue, reviewer shortage. And by reviewer shortage, we have a number of journals that have a lot of reviewers, but the percentage of reviewers who actually review, so part of that may be, you know, with their declining to review, but part of it might also be, well, I'm sure it is, that, you know, there's just not always a good fit between the reviewers that you have and the papers that you get. So, and sometimes it's difficult to anticipate your need in terms of, you know, what areas of a certain specialty do we need to seek more reviewers. Sometimes you don't know what the next, you know, glut of papers is going to be, so it's hard to prepare, you know, to kind of set yourself up for success. I will say that we have had success, a couple strategies in terms of particularly reviewer shortage, but I guess that speaks to reviewer fatigue in not overburdening and overusing, burning out the reviewers who do say yes. So a few strategies in terms of asking current editorial board members for particularly junior colleagues who might be building their CV. They might hopefully have a little bit more time to do a review here and there, but getting suggestions from them, we feel like is probably our #1 way of building our reviewer stable, our reviewer pool, because it's people we are already trusting in the peer review process, and, you know, getting their most trusted people or their best suggestions for new reviewers. We've also had success reaching out to authors who have been accepted in the past and asking them, obviously they have made it successfully through peer review, they have a bit of a sense of how that journal's peer review system works, and if they're interested in moving into a new role. We've also put out calls for reviewers. That's a little bit more labor intensive in terms of most of our editors are very, because they're so involved, they want to vet everyone who is interested in being a reviewer. So just, calling for people who are interested and then getting their CV and then having the editor review that. And, some of them are a little more lenient in terms of, well, let's have them do a review or two and see what they can do, kind of thing, and have that be the vetting process. But some of them are a little more old school, I guess, in terms of looking at it, almost in like a tenure type process to get to a certain level of reviewing. But aside from that, I will say that, like I said, in terms of hands-on, weekend calls and being available, to talk to people, whether it's, in the evenings because of time differences, just reaching out and just being available and being invested in talking with our editors, talking with our reviewers to try and improve the process. I would say those are our main things that we do.
Jennifer, do you want to jump in and say something?
Yes, and I have to say, I'm really loving this discussion because I'm totally going off the rails of what I was planning to say about anything, which I appreciate this very much, all three of you offering things that I'm thinking of as we're talking. I would say, just to piggyback onto that comment about more junior reviewers, that's something that is both a challenge and an advantage at the ASPB. There are many willing and super capable early career researchers who have been co-reviewing or just take over the review entirely. And I feel like, at least anecdotally, our more senior reviewers who are promoting this have done a great job of cultivating that. I would say, though, that a shortcoming is getting a really great training program in place. I know other organizations do this. Again, it's something that we recognize at the ASPB and say, that would be a really great thing to do and to get to when we have time. But it's a great thing. I will say something interesting that the ASPB does do in order to recognize our wonderful reviewers is something that was set up by my predecessor in this role, Patty Lockhart. And what she did was set up something called ASPB Journal Miles. And actually, I should recognize that many of our staff help out with this initiative. But a reviewer receives a certain amount of miles, similar to airline miles, which he or she can then redeem for either journal swag or for ASPB membership in the future. Again, this program does need at this point a revamping and a retargeting so people realize that it's out there. But we've given away many memberships at this point, and also it would be nice to be able to give some other ASPB related non-tangible, something that you don't have to mail. So for instance, in the future, give away some discounts to meetings and so forth. Just things that are, again, a warm touch, recognizing the efforts of our wonderful reviewers. We do have a strong reviewer pool and many senior researchers, but again, we just really need to find a way to better and more mindfully cultivate those early career researchers. And I would say a last challenge, kind of unrelated, but still a challenge indeed, is when we get a new editor-in-chief on our journal. It's always a wonderful time and a wonderful transition. But of course, because editors-in-chief before the new ones have been very involved in the peer review process, which I think is really super important, I then see that there are some things then that need to be reconfigured to the very great suggestions of a new editor-in-chief. So that takes time and effort and that get to know you period to some degree. And another thing that I'm realizing as we're all talking about our amazing staffs, that must be a challenge. I'm spoiled and lucky. Actually, any role I've ever had, it just seems that the unsung heroes are the peer review managers, and they're just the best. And I can only imagine how challenging a role for someone must be if that infrastructure was not in place. That would be a huge challenge if it were not part of an organization. I think that's the first thing anyone should think about, when staffing up their journals program.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dana, tell us a little bit about your challenges.
Yeah, I just want to say amen on the reviewer mentorship. That's like 100% what we need to be doing more of. And I think it's, for us at least, it's kind of twofold. There's certainly the early career aspect of it. I think that's happening. We hear that that's happening on a really informal basis right now. We do have reviewers who are getting, the folks in their labs, their PhDs to assist with reviews. But it's happening kind of outside the system, and we're wanting, I mean, certainly these were things we were talking about pre-COVID, so, they've been put on the back burner a little bit. But, we're wanting to formalize that a little bit so that we kind of establish as ASCE a direct relationship with these folks as they're coming up in their review activities, and provide, some training and mentorship, and also an opportunity to get credit for those reviews that they're helping with. We do the ORCID credit for reviewers, but that's only happening for the reviewers who are in our system and are officially assigned to a manuscript. So we're looking for ways to provide mentorship, but also credit as we start integrating new reviewers into our system. The other thing that we see, and I've referred a couple of times to increase in submissions, what we found for many of our journals is that the major increases in submissions are coming from China. This is really common in engineering. It's a major research area in engineering in China. And Karen, you talked a little bit about a small group of reviewers really conducting the bulk of reviews. We often talk about, I'm pretty sure it's a Publon statistic, that 10% of reviewers, and this is kind of an industry statistic, but that 10% of reviewers conduct 50% of reviews. And so I started digging into that a little bit in our system and looking at, what percentage of reviewers are doing the reviews versus where are the manuscripts coming from on kind of a geographic basis. And what we see is that it's really imbalanced. So we're getting like 45% of our submissions from China, but that accounts for only 30% of our reviewers. But then in the other direction, we're only getting 30% of our submissions from the US, but that's 45% of our reviewers. So what do we do? It's not that these people are not in our system. Many of them are previous authors, and so they're in our system. Our editors could be using them as reviewers, but they're not familiar with the researchers, and the researchers aren't as familiar with the review process. And so it's just not happening. So how do we cultivate those resources? I think it's mentorship, and it's, putting together a program and an initiative that pushes that forward. So those are some of the things that are on our radar.
Great. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting issue to have. So I want to give everybody a little
I just want to jump in and second Jennifer and Dana's just need for more training for reviewers.
Yeah.
I've had a video library on my wish list, to-do list for probably several years now. So I do think that that's something that, we have a guide, for reviewer instructions, but it's so unwieldy, the things that you have to cover, because some of it is, just the actual logistics of the system, and some of it is what that editor expects and what different article types are expected to, cover and not cover in terms of length and that sort of thing. That I feel like there's such a better way to do it, and especially in this scenario where, you know, we know that we can convey things in a different way that hopefully will be a little more clear and a little more digestible. But again, like it's time, it's energy, it's, you know, that's why it remains on my my wish list, to-do list.
Yeah, I'm sure we all have like these huge running to-do lists and wish lists, and some things make it to the top and some things never do. And you know, we've got a new monkey wrench in the system right now. Just some context on, like, it's the end of June of 2020 right now when we're recording this. COVID-19 has been happening. Pretty much our organizations have started to become affected right around March or so of this year. So let's kind of move on and talk about like what's going on with that for all of us. So yeah, let's talk about what are some of the challenges your organization's facing now during COVID-19. And I think that these are all just going to be really different and have thrown a lot of monkey wrenches in some of the previous things that we were talking about. Do you want to kick us off with this one, Jennifer?
Sure. So this is not unique to ASPB. I am not suggesting that at all. However, our entire society and the plant biology community who we represent have just been thrown into a tailspin. Reviewers, editors, and authors have just been forced to accept so many abrupt changes. They shut down labs suddenly. Greenhouses were shut down. Some of them couldn't plant their fields this year. They were learning to teach from home. I can't even imagine, entire, you know, college courses, and then administer exams. Many of these people had childcare responsibilities. Some of them had all of that and then were also caring for ill loved ones or were ill themselves. The strain that has been put on the beloved plant biology community and the world at large, of course, acknowledging that, of course, but just everyone in the world, it's just been remarkable and devastating. And I will say the one silver lining in all of this, I know that's becoming, you know, quite the cliche term, the silver lining, but it's true. I will say that ASPB has really always been a very supportive work environment. So most of us were set up to work from home, and we were able to quickly and easily shut down the office and never even have a blip in service to our community. But what ASPB did really, really early on was to have an extension of any publications related deadlines with grace and understanding, no questions asked, no explanation needed. That was communicated via our social media, via blog post, via our website, via editorials from our editors-in-chief. In fact, these editorials actually extended throughout the plant biology community to other journals that are not even published by us. Everyone just kind of linked up arms and adopted this way of thinking. And we continue that now. And that's worked really well for us. Nothing has been, maybe something's been a little late here or a lot late there, but it hasn't impacted us at all in a negative way. In fact, I think that it's really been helpful for people really to gather up and work together. So I would say those that's, you know, our biggest challenge, but it hasn't been a challenge. Now, a problem though that I do see, and I already mentioned it, is how are our editors and our reviewers and our authors being impacted from COVID and moving on. And of course, like all of science and really all of the world, there's been diversity and inclusion problems that we really need to address head on and really begin to understand. And that's a data analysis thing and a resources thing. So I would say that's a big challenge that's come from all of this as well.
Tana, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes to everything that Jennifer just said. Absolutely. Our researchers are in exactly the same situations. And, you know, of course, as engineers, they're not frontline workers, but they have lots on their plates. So all the same things about extensions and you know, having labs shut and trying to balance One thing, thinking long-term for the journals program, we do wonder, we haven't yet, but we wonder if at some point we're going to start to see a decline in our submissions as a result, depending if and when everybody gets back to their labs, or, is research being published that, and then we end up with a shortage. It's too soon to know for sure. Not to get too far afield from journals and peer review, of course, but at an organizational level, I think many of us are in this boat where our organizations rely on technical conferences that aren't happening. In addition to our journals, ASCE has a huge proceedings publication program. We really rely on conference content, and that's a concern. What's going to happen as people aren't going to these technical conferences, and what's going to take the place of that content. But other than that, I think very similar situation as Jennifer.
What about you, Karen?
Sure. So I think it's this has become the quote unquote new normal. I do feel like everyone is adjusting as best as possible. At the very beginning, so thinking back to March when everything was extremely tumultuous, we did see, again, a bit of a split, not necessarily a medical and nursing split this time, but between authors and reviewers who their full-time job was frontline healthcare workers, where they not only had the challenges of potentially having childcare at home, or having other issues in terms of working from home in their reviewer role, or their perhaps university role, but a lot of the people who are frontline medical workers, nursing workers, that they were in a position where that had to be their priority. So we definitely had to recognize that, and be extremely flexible in terms of deadlines and rescheduling things. Most of our people who we had requested for review, and we certainly had kind of modified our process so that it was clear that if that was your situation and you were unable to do this, just please let us know so that we can move on to someone else. But we actually had people who really went above and beyond in terms of continuing to do what they did for the journal. Like it's so amazing, just their dedication to the bigger profession, where it was clear that they were struggling with a lot of different responsibilities and a new, perhaps their day-to-day was new, or just their entire, home and work life was upheaved. But just, we had a lot of reviewers who reached out to us and they're like, please don't cancel me. Like, I do want to do this review if I can have an extension, or, something of that sort. And we just appreciated their dedication to the journal, and did everything we could to make that work. On the flip side, some of our publications deal with somewhat, there's a certain percentage of procedures that were elective and then were canceled or postponed or rescheduled, not happening. And on that side, we actually had reviewers who had a little more downtime than they were used to having. So instead of being in surgery all day, every day, they were, kind of in a holding pattern. And so that was interesting. It was something we didn't expect, working in healthcare. But and then I'll say, in terms of, we're concerned too about changes in submissions going forward. So we're not necessarily seeing it yet, but it's way too soon to know how things are going to change in the future and how research is going to change. But we have seen a beginning of COVID-related papers Some of those are, extremely relevant. So most of our specialties are not at that bench research level where, you are seeing in the news and that sort of thing. But more, for example, some of our mental health care publications are starting to look at the mental health effects of, all these changes and adjustments that people are, may not be coping with, or people who have established conditions, may not be able to get the services that they need or are used to accessing. So there's definitely been a lot more communication around what needs to be fast tracked and how that process is going to look, and then trying to have enough forethought that there's a lot of concern about that process being sustainable, because we don't know how long, there might be an influx of papers or something like that. So just trying to do our best to gauge that and, put things in place, but that hopefully can be sustainable over the longer term.
Thanks, Karen. So we have had an awesome conversation so far, but we only have time for basically one more question. So I'm going to kind of combine two of the questions I was going to post to you all. Let's just kind of talk about what is something that works for your organization, and have you found anything that does not work? So let's start with Dana on this one.
Sure. So I think our editorial boards are working very well. And I think one thing that we've done well with our editors is kind of strategically looking at the volunteers that we have on our editorial boards and restructuring when we need to. So, increase in submission volume is something that I've mentioned a number of times. I'll be brief and not kind of go through a big case study, but we've looked at our editorial boards here and there where we have journals that are kind of exploding in size, and added, we've kind of broken those journals up into sections when we've needed to. We've added section editors to take some of the burden off the chief editor. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about our managing editors really working hand in hand with their chief editors. So, we'll kind of look at a journal that's having a lot of growth and say, this might be the time to consider, adding some section editors and then putting associate editors under them. So kind of being on top of what's happening in terms of size, and coming up with some, restructuring when we need to. I think that's been working really well. The other thing that I think has been working well is trying to incorporate early career folks into our editorial leadership roles. So we have an early career editorial board pilot program that we introduced, and that's working really well. So it gets some younger folks involved in, kind of the leadership of a journal. Obviously, we still have to tackle the reviewer side of that, but I think it's working really well in terms of, kind of a path to becoming an associate editor. In terms of not figured out yet, I think, there's still, the whole diversity thing, right? Like we've focused mostly on early career. It's kind of where we started in trying to get more diversity on our boards, but we need to do better than that. And some of it is getting at the statistics. Like Jennifer was saying, I had the same exact reaction to Paige's post about what AGU has been doing, and we feel like maybe we could figure out how many women are acting as reviewers or on our boards, but we can't get at the information well. So trying to figure out diversity to a greater extent is still something to tackle.
Thanks. Yeah, that makes sense. It's definitely a large project. What about you, Karen?
So I think, in the interest of summing up, I think I probably touched on all the things earlier that at our organization we would consider best practices. Having sort of an administrative point person at the system level, as well as really carrying people on the ground. So our peer review staff, as well as our journal managers, I think that structure and just those relationships have helped us to be flexible, have helped us to evolve as peer review has evolved, and help us handle changes, including the huge changes, that came about fairly recently. In terms of things that we could do better, I'm going to absolutely echo what Dana said and mention diversity. We've struggled with this with our publications. That's one of the problems with asking your current board to suggest their colleagues. Just like with hiring, everyone tends to pick people like themselves. So it's definitely something we need to look at more in depth and focus on more clearly. Between earlier things that Jennifer and Dana said, that it's our board and reviewer pools are not necessarily reflective of the papers that we're getting, and I think that's a problem. But it's definitely not going to be solved overnight. But it's something that we should put resources toward and improve.
Thanks. And what about you, Jennifer?
So full disclosure, whenever you see me looking down, I'm actually rewriting all of my notes about what I wanted to say today, which is just a testament to how smart you guys are and how much you know and how great this conversation has been. And I feel like we could stay here all day. Rarely is it a challenge to stop talking. It's great. I'm excited about this. But that being said, I would say that what the ASPB is doing right is to piggyback once again onto what Dana's saying. We're really proud of the work that we've done with our early career researchers, and we have well-established assistant features editors on each journal who contribute in multiple ways and are considered integral and full members of our editorial boards. So that's been really hugely crucial for us. I would also say the other thing that I would never want to see ASPB change for any reason is the great staff relationship that exists between the pub staff and the editorial boards. I would say that any one of the members of the editorial, of the pub staff, I should say, from our director of publications all the way on down, everybody has an amazing relationship and contributes in a huge way to really, making that process work well. And I also do think that all of those folks are really thinking about our authors and our reviewers too, and how we can make the process even better moving forward. I would say another critical piece of ASPB is our commitment to the evolution of peer review, particularly open peer review, which I mentioned that we are hoping to evolve over time, but there's so much more to that. How can we back post, for instance, bioRxiv does do this with some folks such as eLife and a couple others I can't think of off the top of my head. eLife is one though, where they back post open peer review reports back to the preprint server itself so that readers can see the evolution of peer review. But then also what happens after an article is published? Does peer review end? I mean, things evolve over time. So how can we continue, make peer review more of a continuum, a circular thing that just goes round and round? That's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about with one of my colleagues, Mary Williams, who is a features editor on the Plant Cell. But we actually wrote up a proposal looking at how we can continue the peer review process over time. But of course, that takes money and then a platform and then folks to oversee that. But we're thinking about it. And I think that's important, just to continue to think about it. Once you have put something online or printed a journal, it doesn't end there. It doesn't. What happens to a paper in 2 to 5 years? That seems like a really fascinatingly critical time. Is that research holding up to the test of time? We all know the articles that are like 50 years old and are the mainstays of whatever our field might be. But what about the newer, maybe novel and exciting articles? We've also looked at that exact topic by having webinars and conversations with mixing some of our more senior researchers with early career researchers to delve into that topic. What makes research novel, which is a whole review thing in and of itself. So again, we've had those conversations, but then what's next? How do we make that discussion translate into a permanent change in thinking? But I do think it's important to acknowledge that the conversations are happening. And I'm looking down at my new notes. I'm not practiced for what I came up with here. I think really the critical thing though too is a more formalized data analysis situation in which any organization can really look at who their reviewers are, who their editors are, what is being published. Is there a better way to be doing this to be more inclusive and to really grab the important research? But again, it's a whole resource thing. There's only so much money. There's only so much time in the day. There's all of these great things we could be studying, but how to do it. But don't stop talking about it. Don't stop thinking about it. Changes can be made, and they won't be made if we're not talking about them. And I'll jump off my soapbox and shut my mouth now.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. And I'm going to put our contact information back up. I just want to wrap up by thanking SSP for having us do this on-demand session. You can tweet the SSP on-demand hashtag. And we hope to continue this conversation with you all through question and answers at some point. And I just want to thank our panelists today for this great discussion. I hope that we can just kind of continue learning from each other and continuing to have these important conversations. It sounds like we've got a lot figured out, but it's still, a lot to go. So yeah, we welcome any questions from today's attendees, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.